Well, hello there, and it's Radagast again, and another Mystic Brew, and the operating title for this is More Truth or More Wisdom. I just got finished listening to the last Dark Journalist installation, I guess, about the Deep Space Program and the Corey's kids, just that whole thing. And I don't want to get into that too much. I'm adjusting my camera. But it it's a little disturbing for me, only because, as I spoke about in my video about disclosure, one of the most motivated people for disclosure, I believe, is the Vatican. Because their desire is for a universal religion. And all religions work on a revelation. Whether it's revelation of Moses or Jesus or Muhammad, and for Islamic people, peace be upon them. Although Jesus is supposed to get a PBUH also, and so is Moses. But it's, as we can see, apparently it's time for a new revelation, and a revelation that won't be isolated to a specific community. It won't just be in the Levant. It won't just be in Rome. It won't just be in the Saudi Arabian Peninsula. One that can be broadcast worldwide, on the web. One that the MSM will cover. And of course, that should be a big red flag. But what I see also in this kind of disclosure now movement, or the whole thing that I see shaping up with the Corey Good thing, that's really Gaia TV. And first it was Jordan Sather, then it was Teresa, and now I guess it's Sabrina and Sterling, and they're all singing from the same songbook in their own unique voices, so it makes it seem like these are people who just speaking their truth, and they might be. But I thought it was interesting that on the same day, two of the aforementioned people were revealing their business plans and readings you can have, and ways of them generating an income for themselves, which of course is fine with me. But the emergence of two people at the same time seems as if they're being tutored, is how I guess I would say it. And so I see that the new revelation is not just meant for those who have been following more organized religions, but also for those who have left organized religion. The new religion of scientism, which also has its heretics. We see Bill Nye, the shill guy, was on CNN, and the fact that there was somebody who actually had a degree in science, which Bill Nye does not, was saying how he thought it was unfair that that this man should be able to speak in a panel of three people who basically agreed on climate change. And of course, climate always does change. Global warming was starting to look a little silly, so this climate change, and now we have climate denier, which is basically heresy, and we're seeing more in this kind of Gaia TV contact in the desert thing, at least with a certain portion of it, where anybody who disagrees is a hater, which is what we're also seeing from the cultural Marxism about haters. There's a lot of slogans that I'm seeing in common, and but with these different words, what we're really hearing is basically heresy. And heresy isn't so dangerous as it used to be, but if you manage to grab a large portion of the world's religions under one new religion, and since it's delivered by spaceman, you also have all of these new kind of new ager type people saying, "Oh yeah, we're on board with this new revelation because it came from somebody in a flying saucer." You're going to see a group mind, and that those who do not accept the new revelation will be heretics. And I don't think that heresy will be treated so kindly if that happens. So I actually see something really dangerous shaping up. But again, that's because I see a convergence of forces that is not obvious. The New Age people who left traditional religion and traditional religions couldn't seem to be further apart. Bring in Mr. Spaceman, and you might see a convergence. And of course, a revelation that if it's accepted by billions of people, and that those who are calling bullshit on it are then considered heretics, things could get ugly. And I mean lethally ugly. So I'm a little concerned about what I'm seeing going on, and a lot of this has to do with with cognitive dissonance, to the fact that we have been removed by by what is now called history, and of course the traumatization of whatever indigenous tribes. The Aborigines have been severely traumatized. They used to live on all the coastal areas where there was vegetation, and they were largely vegetarians in their own traditions. They'll tell you that. Once they were driven inland, they had to start eating flesh because that's what was available. And with that consumption, I believe there was a certain degradation of spirit that came with that was not there. Our own Native American, since I'm an American, the Native Americans, or Indians as they call themselves now, because again, there's a way of, that's what they prefer to be called, apparently. I think it has to do with, making a little bit of a joke out of out of Christopher Columbus thinking he was in India, or at least claiming he was, and maybe he knew he wasn't. But even they've been traumatized, through mass extinction, not to a person, but marginalized, removed from their ancestral grounds, their ancestral ways of living, not being able to be nomadic the way they were, and of course the introduction of alcohol. Has been really, and of course the alcohol was one way of dealing with the pain of the trauma. Alcohol anesthetizes one. If you have extreme psychic pain, alcohol is one of the roads that people will take, and an understandable one. But as understandable as it is, it still comes with damage, if not out and out ruin of people. So I got the DJ part out, and then and then there's even the how, what traditions there might be out there, like Michael Tellinger. To me, this is somebody who I have, when he would speak early on, I never really got a particularly good feeling from him. Just the way he would start his, and to Archangel Michael and to Metatron, it was like he had to do a catechism of New Age ascended masters or something. And he'd had an oral agreement with Credo Mutwa to tell his story, and that agreement was not followed through with. And then even his Ubuntu, a very nice idea, but what's Ubuntu? It's a traditional African way of doing things, or at least a tradition in a certain portion of Africa. So basically, he's bringing up a tradition and almost like acting as the steward of this idea. To me, it's little more than appropriation. Same thing with a lot of the people who supposedly are teaching us about Native Americans. How many of them are really the medicine men or the sages? Time and time again, what it is that, we'll get some trappings of it, but the deep wisdom, and most importantly, how important living on this planet and in this world, two different things. The world is a psychological construct. The planet, or the terra firma beneath us, is the physical manifest, is the natural state. The world is not necessarily the natural state. The world is the psychological the psychological programs in us that we project out and call the world that we live in, not the terra firma that we live on. And as I'm constantly trying to get people to realize that all these that we're surrounded by various systems, religious systems, legal systems, this system, that system, and the only system that really is natural to us is the ecosystem. And we see the ecosystem being destroyed. And the reason the ecosystem is being destroyed is because the people who control the other systems are anthropophobic, it appears. It appears that they really are afraid of the natural person, the natural human being, and even the legal definition of a natural person, sea monster. A natural person is someone who has not accepted a revelation. It's kind of like almost like a Christian definition, probably from the Pax Romana, out of the Vatican. We're surrounded by systems that are alien to us, that exhibit a phobia of us, an anthropophobia. For the anthropos, which is one of the words to apply to the human species. And so I haven't made a Mystic Brew in a few days because I'm not I'm kind of uncertain of how to slice the bigger picture into pieces of information that are digestible enough to start changing the inner landscape. Because when I'm now, the more and more as I using certain understandings of who and what we are and looking at the system, things start to unlock. And then when I look around about, gee, how do we redress this? I realize that the only redressing is changing the psychology of people. That even in the language, when I engage in conversations and the buts that come out, the buts are part of social and other forms of programming that I hear in people's language. The debate is often a defense of the system that is not the ecosystem, that is not our natural system. So it's been really difficult for me to get out of Mystic Brew, but tonight I got a little inspired just by listening to what's going on with the Corey Good thing. And let's see, and what's interesting as I go listen from a variety of sources, it's my understanding as a sovereign being on this planet and a creation myth that makes us as the sovereign species on the planet to help creation unfold, and how important sharing is. And a very interesting thing is chimpanzees. There's two species of chimpanzees. One of the bonobos, or sometimes called the pygmy chimp, and then there's the other chimp called the troglodytes. And that's where we get troglodyte, when we talk about like a warlike primitive human being. And these two species of chimps couldn't be different. The troglodytes chimp will hunt other monkeys and eat it. They've even been known to kill leopards, which of course is one of their kind of adversaries in the natural world, but they'll also eat that. It's almost like it's totemistic. And if two bands of troglodytes chimps meet each other in the wild, they engage in warfare. Now, if two groups of bonobos run each other into the wild, they have orgies. Now for certain people, again, with certain kinds of systems of morality is part of their programming, might go, oh, I don't know. I mean, orgies, that sounds like really immoral. And I will just say, let's look at the fruits of it, okay? So when two groups meet, and if somebody from one group kills somebody of a family of one group and vice versa, what do we get? We get blood feuds. If two groups meet and they fuck, what do we get? We get blood ties. So I ask you, which is more moral? Blood feuds, blood feuds or blood ties? The blood ties that bind us. And so again, I'm not saying that we can't have certain codes of behavior that are not quite as feral as that, but when you just look at them in these very stark instances, is it better to fuck or to fight? And what is the fruit of fighting and having orgies? And that is something I think worth looking at. And and again, the portrayal by science of that before civilization we were nothing but brutes throwing rocks at each other could not be, I think, in my knowing and even in my studies, could not be further from the truth. And Göbekli Tepe, which is about 11 to 12,000 years old, is a very interesting time because apparently at that time we were what would be called hunter-gatherers or even nomadic. And what's interesting is that the people, at least probably with some guidance, but these people built Göbekli Tepe, this huge complex that is still, I think, only about 10% uncovered, before they built permanent housing. And again, that looks like what's up with this? Well, to me, if you have a ritual gathering place for nomadic tribes to gather in, it makes sense to put all your energy into that. Why build structures that you're only inhabiting for so many months of the year? When you're obtaining firewood and berries and also wild hunting, you can't stay in one place without exhausting it, especially if you want the firewood that naturally falls from trees, that naturally shed their branches, that blow over and whatever. And if you move enough, you never have to cut down the living trees, or very few of them, to sustain yourself. And so therefore you're not a blight or cancer on the ecosystem. Permanent dwellings, especially when wood was a big part of how we kept ourselves warm and cooked things, it was, you stayed one place, and little by little the forest went away and the forest went away, and you start degrading the ecosystem. Similarly, it seems that there is one form of wheat that all other forms of wheat come from. And it really seems that during the hunter-gatherer times, what they did was they basically cut the wheat, placed it in water, maybe with some other herbs, and made a light kind of naturally occurring alcoholic brew. It fermented naturally. It didn't need fire. And some people said, well, gee, they made brew instead of bread. Well, bread takes, what do you have to do with bread? You need wood to cook it. They didn't need bread. They had berries and roots and, of course, whatever animals they chose to eat. Animals that ran wild and had free lives until that time that their life was brought to an end by a hunter. And I might have said before, the natural life for any non-predatory animal is to be eaten. The moment you get slow, the moment you get ill, you act differently than the rest of your group, and the predator sees that and says, that one's mine. So when it comes to hunting, there's a kind of I see something completely okay with that. Now, I'm not sure. I have my own opinions about eating flesh and its spiritual implications, but I'm not going to go there. The most important, because I really want to make this about natural living, and hunting is a part of natural living. It's a part of how we live in the ecosystem, the only system that was given to us and was ours to manage. All these other systems were developed by others, and they manage those of us that get scooped up into the system. Until we start to see these foreign systems far into who we are as the anthropos, the human being, the natural human being. Until we start to see these systems for what they are, we will not be able to extricate ourselves to them, because we won't know what to extricate ourselves to. A lot of times we're going, well, if we break this system, we need another system. Basically, we now have a worldwide system of communication, which is really, to me, a form of world telepathy before we get our telepathy back. I think we get our telepathy back when there aren't any thought crimes. I believe that when thought crimes came about, that's when we had to shut down, because it was deadly to have an open mind. As soon as you have heresies, it's dangerous to share your thoughts. So, if we really look at history, we can see a systematic shutting down of our natural telepathy, a shutting down of our natural access to the environment. Where kings owned the land. Robin Hood ran into a problem where he was, his crime was hunting. His men were living in the woods, so he was hunting the king's deer. Again, this is where we come with this whole Anunnaki and then the lines that come out of the Anunnaki with some kind of king, supreme king or queen that we have some kind of subservience to, and meanwhile we're the ones doing all the work. That's parasitic, and that's not to say that societies didn't have leaders, but the leaders led. They didn't, instead of they would lead and not bleed their people. And so that's what we have now. Our leaders are nothing more than bleeders of the people that they supposedly lead. And we have to get our minds around that. So that kind of brings me to, do we need more truth or more wisdom? Because, another name for the alternative community is the truth community. And then truth basically becomes whatever information that you find yourself attracted to. And even with the Anunnaki story, still a lot of people are, Sitchin has been somewhat discredited, but there's a Frenchman called Anton Parks who has written about an extensive history, including, because he has memories. Apparently, you could say he made this up, but if he made it up, man, this is a story that is one of the greatest fictional creative minds on the planet. But it ties in too much with what we see in the seals. But it goes further back. If you want some words to maybe Google and then read, you might find a good portion of it on a Bibliotheca Pleiades.net, I think it is. You'll find just about anything there. But words to look up: Namlu, Namlu'. Kadishtu can be spelled with a Q or a K, but it would be, if K, it's Kadishtu, right? Kadishtu, Kadishtu. And sometimes, rather than the H, they'll have an S with the dot over it, which is to tell you that S is sounding like an SH. The Kadishtu is also where we get the word caduceus. And they were a female-only group of people, group of beings that were known also as the life designers. Anton Parks gets into languages, how where they came from off planet, and how there was a distinct language that only women spoke, and then there was a language that the men spoke. And even in today, in Aboriginal Australia, amongst the people in the outback, the women have a language and the men have a language. Unfortunately, from what I've read, they basically use the language to curse each other. They are, in many ways, as much as they have of their traditions, the trauma of their experience. And I also think the almost exclusively meat-based diet that they're eating now has created something that was not there and something that isn't pretty. What am I going on? 24 minutes? Okay. So let me make sure there's nothing else here. I don't want this to be a long one. I have to go out and get myself some food and a pouch of tobacco. Yeah, so that's it. I mean, to me, the two concerns I really have, the one concern really is that this convergence of disclosure. To me, I would like them. What we really need disclosure on is of our history that has been covered up, and that is lied over by science as they portray us as brutes, throwing rocks at each other, and every time we met, we would fight. And there aren't many places to get that. The work of John Lash, especially his book Not in His Image, is a great place to go. There's a lot of good scholarship. Some of it goes back far enough, some of it doesn't. On the Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio, endless interviews with really great thinkers and scholars. But it certainly is an attempt to get some good studied information that little by little might help divest some of this parasitic incrustation that's in our psychology. Because for us to be able to re-systemize, to return to the ecosystem, we're going to have to know what those shackles are. And so truth or wisdom, and wisdom, the Greek word for wisdom is Sophia, and you might have heard me use that word a few times. So do we need more truth or do we need more Sophia? And so that Sophia is our connection to our past, to our creation, and our rightful place, not only in our world, but in our rightful placement into our cosmology. And one of the reasons I'm asking people to get a little bit acquainted with the word Namlu'u is because part of where I ultimately want to take this is how the Anunnaki story and the Sophian narrative have a convergence point themselves, and what and the importance, I think, of these Namlu'u, and who. Well, that's another story because I really don't want to end this. But what gets revealed in the surprising creation by the Kadishtu of this being, the Namlu'u, and they were trying to create a really high form hominid, and they ended up with something way beyond their expectation, a being that exceeded their own. And I believe one of the reasons why this being exceeded their own, because they had built a vessel that was able to take the indwelling spirit of Sophia and embody that. And the importance I feel that has for our galaxy. In the past, I've said little bits about after there was the creation of Namlu'u, which is to me the kind of the epitome of the Sophianic dream. Of what we can become once that was released, and also released into the morphogenetic field, that becomes kind of a destination point where I've said when the anthropos or humanity pops, a true form of ascension. These Namlu'u were trans-dimensional, and in the Anton Park story, especially in the deeper part, it's very hard to find this, and it was on the Jerry Zeitlin website that got taken down, but it gets into just how it had to do with Enki traveling with one of the ladies, part of the Kadishtu, or at least half part of the Kadishtu, and where they witnessed a group of Neanderthals stamping their feet and chanting a certain way, and into an empty circle, and into this empty circle the Namlu'u came and visited them. And I really believe that in our galaxy, of which Orion is part of the galaxy, but it's actually a little bit further out than we are. As far out as we are, Orion's a little further out. And that the way the way that this galaxy at least comes back from some of the error and distortion and darkness is not through any kind of warfare. It is, and what to kind of close on this, what I see in the allowance and the wisdom of Sophia, which is to see Sophia's wisdom, or the wisdom of wisdom, is that by allowing these other races to put some of their genetic material into our vehicle, when we pop our own personal Earth form of ascension, which is will have galactic implications because of quantum entanglement. And so the way we help heal these warlike races isn't through more war, it isn't through quarantine, it is through the fact that we have their genetics entangled with us, and when we go to the next place, it impacts the rest of the galaxy. And I really think in many ways that is part of Sophia's dream, which of course is part of the pleroma or the Godhead, because they're connected. There's no real break there. We just happen to have a nice juicy node with us. And so through our own ascension, to use a phrase that might work for some people, we actually help heal the galaxy because of the quantum entanglement. And I will leave it there. So try to stay in your hearts where wisdom is. Look for wisdom instead of just truth. Look for knowledge that helps you tie knots together so you understand your place in this world, in this galaxy, and that we have a really glorious task and a mission that is tied in with a divine plan, or for the galaxy, the divine plan. And I'll leave you there, so stay sane. Again, stay in your hearts, and I'll see you next time.